Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today Magnus played in round 4 of the European Club. Now we saw his games earlier, how he was not able to win with black and how he had a brilliant win with white pieces. But in this game he played Pentala Harikrishna, a very strong grandmaster, rated above 2700 from India. So let's see how Magnus approaches this game. So he plays the move c4, going for the English opening, e5 and g3. Here black played c6, one of the main moves for black, trying to build a big center with the move d5, and white played d4. Another move that white can play here is the move knight f3, hitting this pawn over here, and black usually plays e4, knight d4, and d5. And this is actually how Nepomniachtchi crushed Ding Liren in the first round of the candidates. And he actually went on to win that candidates. So d4 by Magnus, bishop b4 check, bishop d2, takes, and d6. All of this is pretty standard. White can take here, but black is absolutely fine in this endgame. I mean, black is arguably maybe even better. The bishop comes out, f6, the king can sit here or over here, and black has nothing to worry about. But the main move is knight c3, knight f6, and here Magnus plays an unusual move. The main move here has always been the move bishop g2, and actually I also had a game here, which is already 11 years ago. So e3, bishop b6, my opponent played rook to d1, knight a6, b3, takes, knight b4, threatening a little fork here, queen e2, and bishop f5. All of this is actually theory. Nothing has changed over all of those years. Rook e8, knight g2, take. And as we very often see, after a long line, it leads to equality because black will win back the piece. Anyway, just wanted to give you guys a bit of insight as to what Magnus exactly wanted to avoid. Alright, so Magnus plays this unusual move, e4. And this actually has only been played once in 1992 in a game between Kalai and everyone's favorite commentator Peter Leko in 1992. Now most of you guys were not even born at the time, and even if you were born, you were probably pee-pee in your pampers. But anyway, castle by Harikrishna, it's also a move Leko played. And here, Magnus plays the first novelty. So in that game, white played bishop to g2, and black played knight bd7, knight f3 was played, and a6 by Leko trying to go for b5. And eventually, the game was approximately even and it ended in a draw. Alright, so let's go back. So Magnus played knight ge2, but this does allow black the option of going b5 right away. Because Magnus took. And now the problem is you cannot take on b5 because black will take on e4. This pawn is no longer protected and white is in trouble. So Magnus played a3. And here Harikrishna made an inaccuracy. He should have played knight c6, putting a little bit more pressure on the center. Bishop g2 and queen b6, hitting this pawn once more. And white has to make an awkward decision, right? If you go d5, black goes knight a5, and black is absolutely fine here because this bishop on g2 is kind of dead, staring at its own pawn. This bishop is still pretty alive. This knight is jumping around. So black has a very good game here. But Harikrishna played a5, bishop g2, bishop b7, short castles, and b4. So a very direct approach, but unfortunately it seems to backfire for black a little bit. Magnus took, black recaptured, knight d5. You cannot capture on a8 right away because black has this little intermezzo hitting the queen, and black is fine. So knight d5, takes, queen b6, now Magnus takes, and we get to this position where white has this isolated pawn, but it's also a passed pawn. And the question always in these types of positions is the passed pawn a weakness or an asset? And I think in this situation, it's more of an asset because it's going to be very difficult for black to stop this pawn down the line. And Magnus here played a very instructive move. He played the move g4. Alright, so he's gaining more space on the king side, but he's also preparing the move knight at g3. Because if we look at this position here, where is this knight going to go? But again, here he creates a very nice square for his knight. The knight can jump to f5, can also jump to e4 to potentially maybe create threats towards the black king and support this passed pawn. So knight at d7, knight g3, g6, stopping the knight hop to f5, and Magnus plays rook to c1. A very natural move, grabbing the open c-file. However, the computer slightly prefers the move rook to d1 to support this pawn on d5, but the drawback is that you give black the c-file. So it's very understandable that Magnus did not want to do that. So he goes rook c1, rook d8, and knight e4, centralizing his knight. Harikrishna goes knight f6, and now Magnus takes. And here white can take a pawn, but it's not really recommended that you take. Black can play e4, which is a very strong move, apparently. But also the simple bishop takes d5 should be fine for black. I mean, you take, there is a check. Now do not play king g7, because you get checkmated. But black can play rook d8, and white is still a little bit better in this endgame, because he has the passed b pawn, but black with accurate play should be able to hold here. But Magnus makes a much better decision. He goes rook to c5, defending this pawn on d5, and now Harikrishna has to play queen b6 if he wants to defend this one. Magnus plays queen e3, defending the rook, and already white is starting to bring some tactics in this position. If we have a very close look, we see that the queens are having a stare-off on this diagonal. So Harikrishna played queen a7, trying to give a check over here. Magnus played queen c1, and potentially also preparing this move rook to c8, which is why black played bishop e7. And now Magnus, again, played a very instructive move. What do computers do when all the pieces are well placed and there's no clear way forward? You push the h-pawn. Right, so h4, very nice move. He wants to go h5, maybe h6. And that pawn on h6 will always be a thorn in black's side. There will always be checkmating ideas around the black king. So Harikrishna played queen b6, h5 by Magnus, and h6. Again, you don't want to allow this pawn to come here, because again, there will always be checkmating ideas. So Magnus played queen e3, bring the queen back, and potentially putting some pressure here. And Harikrishna took this pawn on h5. A very natural move, and perhaps he was expecting Magnus just to recapture. But here Magnus played a very strong move. He played the move rook to c8. And black's in a lot of trouble. Because first of all, white is attacking the queen, right? So you cannot take the rook, I take the queen, and white's winning. Now what happens if black takes the queen on e3? Well, then you take here with a check. Black has to take has to move the king, and then you take the queen, and you're up a rook. So black has to move the queen, but at the same time also defend the rook, and that's what Harikrishna does. But this allows Magnus to take on d8, and now take here. And the problems continue for black. Because again, now white is going after the black king. If you take this pawn on g4, white goes bishop e4 and starts creating an attack towards the black king. And there's not much black can do. If you take on d5, the easiest way for win to white is to give a check, check, trade the queens, and you're up a bishop in the endgame. Black still has some pawns, but white is winning here with the correct technique. And if black plays f5 first, then white gives a check over here. And if the king steps over, you take here. And you start grabbing a lot of pawns with check, and the attack continues. So black is also lost here. So Harikrishna took this pawn on d5. He's also stopping this bishop from coming in. But now Magnus played another very strong move. And these types of moves are sometimes very difficult to spot, because they are retreating moves. Magnus played the move queen in d2, hitting the bishop. And there's no way for black to save the bishop. If you go e4, white just takes, and you're still going to lose this. So Harikrishna took, now Magnus took the bishop on d5. And here black really should have played a move like queen g5, keeping the queens on the board. White should still be winning here, but it requires some technique. There's not a whole lot of pawns on the board. The queen can always give a bunch of checks, maybe g3, to open up the king a little bit more. But black traded on d5, and this made white's task considerably easier. King to g7, king g2, f5. Now Magnus brings the king up and goes king h4. And sooner or later, black is going to end up in zugzwang. So he played pawn e4, bishop c6 by Magnus. He's just waiting. The king went up, king g3. And again, black's just getting into zugzwang. You cannot push this pawn, you lose this. He went king up, king f4, king e3. Magnus took, e3, takes. And now, again, you have to be very accurate till the very end. The natural move here looks like it's going to be king takes g4, but here black saves the game with the move b3. Because if you go bishop d5, black is just in time to get rid of the last pawn. But of course Magnus spotted that and played the move b3, g3, king g4. Sorry for those notifications. King takes g3, king c3. And actually Harikrishna resigned after move b3. Because if he goes g3, there's king g4, king d3, takes. And white is just in time. Alright, so Magnus wins a very nice game. And with this win, he's also actually gaining rating. If we have a very quick look at the rating list, he's gaining one whole whopping point. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.